I mean, the Republicans are trying to defund the FBI. They're nominating a convicted felon. They're trying to surge machine guns onto our streets and in our schools. This is not a party that respects the rule of law.
Yeah, with respect, Congressman, I mean, I keep asking about Joe Biden. You keep talking about Donald Trump. But there are
because the questions about Joe Biden are questions about who can beat Donald Trump.
When the Fox propaganda network attempted to sandbag him about President Biden's debate performance during an interview, a Democratic congressman flipped the script and used the opportunity to remind Fox viewers about Biden's objectively superior executive and legislative record compared to Trump's. And the Fox host in question was visibly and audibly annoyed. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to look at in this video. It's always fun when the Fox Propaganda Network makes the mistake of interviewing a well-prepared Democratic surrogate, usually somebody like Pete Buttigieg, whose record against Fox is unimpeachable. He always defeats them. He always outsmarts them. He always outdebates them. Well, here's someone you might not have heard from or heard about before, a guy by the name of Jake Auchincloss, who is a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts. He was invited on to the Fox Propaganda Network, and you can tell the whole thing was about President Biden's debate performance and whether or not he's up to the job. And Auchincloss used the opportunity to remind Fox viewers who may never have heard about this stuff, given that Fox is hermetically sealed in terms of praising President Biden and, listing out his objective achievements, to do just that. I want to play some of these clips and unpack them together with you.
That there are Haley voters in the heartland who are desperate to vote for anybody besides Trump, and we have to have a message of law and order to appeal to those voters. I mean, the Republicans are trying to defund the FBI. They're nominating a convicted felon. They're trying to surge machine guns onto our streets and in our schools. This is not a party that respects the rule of law.
Yeah, with respect, Congressman, I mean, I keep asking about Joe Biden. You keep talking about Donald Trump. But there are
because the questions about Joe Biden are questions about who can beat Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is the threat to democracy right now.
Do you really think Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump? Or would Kamala Harris be a better person to do that? Would Gavin Newsom be a better person to do that? Do you think after that debate performance, this is the guy you want running for president?
Every one of those names that you just mentioned could beat Donald Trump. And the reason why is because Donald Trump is unpopular. He's actually probably the most unpopular national politician of modern American history, because voters don't want to see their tax returns have a little partisan affiliation box they have to check next year. They don't want their Social Security checks to come with strings attached. They don't want forced deportations of their friends and their neighbors who are trying to become American citizens. They don't want to see him supplicating himself in front of Vladimir Putin like he did in 2018 in
Right,
Helsinki.
but there are a lot of Democratic and independent voters who want to see somebody with the mental competence to run, and increasingly they don't think that's Joe Biden.
The opinion of Pennsylvanians, of Michigans, of Wisconsinites is absolutely vital. Don't disagree with you there. And that is going to be the challenge ahead of the top of the Democratic ticket, is to make a strong and sharp contrast against what Donald Trump is offering. This is not just about the past and about the record of accomplishments. This is about the future as well. And Democrats have a much more compelling vision of the future than MAGA Republicans do. We want an economy that works for everyone. We don't want this next tax bill to reward the wealthy and the well-connected. We want to defend and enhance U.S. global leadership. And that's going to resonate with voters. But yes, we need strong communicators for it.
So you heard John Roberts there, the Fox propaganda host there. He audibly sighed. I mean, very unprofessional. He huffed and puffed during Representative Auchincloss's answer. And again, Auchincloss was quick on his feet. You know, I actually love the hypocrisy of it, too. Fox is whining like, I'm asking you about Joe Biden and you're making it about Donald Trump. Well, that's exactly what surrogates should do. By the way, it's what Republicans do anytime they're asked about Trump. They try to make it about Biden. Right-wing and mainstream media wants to focus exclusively at the moment on President Biden and ignore the fact that Donald Trump, who was the former president, is the presumptive Republican nominee to be president, someone who should be held to the same damn standard as Joe Biden, is being graded on a curve. Now, again, Fox and John Roberts, they have a vested interest in this because they're ideologically predisposed to back Trump. But I love that Auchincloss is not falling for it. He's like, listen, the reason I'm making this about Trump is because this really is about Trump versus Biden. And at the end of the day, Biden has just simply an objectively superior legislative and executive record. I also love the fact that, you know, obviously Roberts isn't in a position to refute anything. Auchincloss has the facts. Robert does not. But I love the fact that Roberts says, well, listen, this is also about cognitive fitness and whether or not the candidate in question is in a position to assume the duties of office, whether or not they're fit for office. But as you and I know, because we have talked about this in multiple videos, poll after poll after poll after poll after poll, including polls after the debate at the end of June, they said that Donald Trump is mentally unfit to be president too. Like, yes, obviously these polls have been consistently worse for President Biden with respect to polling, but this is the problem. Roberts and Fox want you to believe, and they gaslight. This is where, if I had to critique Auchincloss's answer at all, it would be this. The presumption is that the majority of Americans, or virtually all Americans, believe that Donald Trump is fit to be president. They don't. In poll after poll after poll, it is a majority who say that Donald Trump is also mentally unfit to be president as well. So Auchincloss, in my opinion, should respond with, well, if that's the question, or if that's the concern, John Roberts, well, this is a concern that's about both candidates, because again, a majority of polls say that a majority of Americans have issues with Donald Trump's mental fitness as well. So then we have to evaluate the candidates based on substance, based on policy, based on accomplishments, and that's where Joe Biden is just objectively far superior to Trump. So I would critique him there, but I love how he answers this. And we've got another clip as well from that interview with Fox News and John Roberts.
But there are a number of your Democratic colleagues who believe this should be an open discussion, a very public one, because the future of the party in these elections are at stake. Do you disagree with that?
I think the party needs to have a dynamic discussion about our best ticket. But regardless of the outcome here, it's going to be a team sport going forward. The Democratic Party has a terrific bench of talent. We got Pete Buttigieg go out there talking about infrastructure and the economy. Gina Raimondo talking about domestic manufacturing and outcompeting China. Kamala Harris on reproductive rights and the rule of law. We have a strong story because we've got a strong record. This economy was flat on its back 4 years ago. Since then, it's been 15 million jobs, 18 million small business applications. The United States is stronger relative to China for the first time in a presidential administration in the 21st century. And so we don't need any one single communicator. We need a team of communicators to actually put voice to our accomplishments over the last 4 years.
Love this freaking energy, folks. Again, at this point, as I've said before, the debate has been had. People have had an opportunity to air their public grievances, to air their concerns about President Biden's candidacy, but he came out and said that he is not moving aside. And ultimately, that decision is between him and the Democratic leaders if they attempt to put pressure on him. The fact of the matter is that Biden or no Biden, the Democratic agenda under the Biden-Harris administration, and spearheaded by progressives in particular in the Democratic Party like Bernie Sanders, right? So this coalition of anti-Trumpers, the Democratic record of accomplishments is vastly superior to the Republican alternative. And Auchincloss is right. You know, there's this notion that the president has to be an apex communicator. And certainly that would be very handy, given that rhetoric is really important to a powerful president. But at the end of the day, the first and foremost role of the president of the United States is not to be the grand communicator. They're supposed to be chief executive. There's a reason that presidents employ press secretaries, directors of communication, and a whole array of surrogates, right? If you're creating a president, the ideal president, as a D&D character where you're assigning skill points, rhetoric isn't unimportant, but at the end of the day, it's, executive management. It's the ability to delegate. It's, talent and recruitment and all of these things. These are the aspects of a chief executive, which are most important. And under President Biden's leadership, the Democratic Party has simply delivered an objectively far superior record to Donald Trump. And I love the fact that Auchincloss used this opportunity to relentlessly hammer home the facts to an audience which may have never otherwise heard them. This is from a different interview on a different network, CNN, but since we're talking about Jake Auchincloss, he also makes the case to CNN viewers as well. And this is important, I will add, because of course, CNN is part of mainstream media, and I have no doubt that the vast majority of CNN reporters will vote Democrat and have voted Democrat. But as I've mentioned, it's simply a fact. Mainstream media is not ideologically predisposed towards the Democrats in terms of how they do their jobs. Right now, the New York Times, CNN, even MSNBC, which is about as far left and ideologically left as the mainstream media gets, they are constantly fielding stories and having interviews about President Biden's debate performance. So they are willing to criticize him, to put him under a microscope in ways that right-wing media will not do for the Republicans. So it's important that CNN viewers hear this as well. So we're going to play this clip and unpack it together.
I think less important than the stagecraft is the statecraft. And this NATO summit, I understand some are saying it's ill-timed. I actually think it's well-timed for the president because of all the many reasons why I think he's going to be ranked in the top 10 in terms of presidential terms. His foreign policy is a cardinal one. Rallying NATO to the defense of Ukraine, rallying Indo-Pacific allies like South Korea and Japan and Australia to counter Chinese belligerence, engaging with the global South productively. He's got a lot of success in his foreign policy domain, and this is going to accentuate that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Real quick, the New York Times reported recently, and the Post, about concerns from European officials, specifically about the NATO summit that's going to be here in Washington this week, about President Biden's ability to represent America's interests. Do you have any of those concerns?
Not at all. And these diplomats should focus on geopolitics and less so on domestic politics. Joe Biden has been one of the most successful foreign policy presidents of modern history. And the alternative is Donald Trump, who in Helsinki in 2018 supplicated himself in front of Vladimir Putin in a manner that two former Republican nominees themselves said was embarrassing. He wants to hand back Ukraine to Russia. So there is no choice here.
Last quick question. Once again this morning, the president sidestepped questions, pretty much declined a question about whether he would take some kind of cognitive test or release real deep records about his medical situation. Do you want him to do that?
I think all presidential candidates should undergo neurological and medical testing that they make available to the public. I think.
So again, tough questions from CNN that Jake Auchincloss answered very well. And he was always quick to point out, in addition to President Biden's objectively superior record, as long as President Biden remains the nominee, he's also quick to point out that the same standard should be held to Donald Trump. So if we're going to demand that presidential candidates take neurological tests, fair enough, then that's a standard that should be applied to Donald Trump as well. And while we were talking, one other clip I want to play from the Fox thing. I thought I was done with it, but another clip just dropped, and I think it's worth addressing.
Biden campaign strategy was to talk about Donald Trump and make this election all about Donald Trump. But now this election has become all about Joe Biden. Is that an election he can win?
14 million Democratic primary voters think he can win it, and the Democratic Party should walk humbly before it contravenes the will of our voters. Unlike the Republican Party, we respect free and fair elections, and what unifies us as a party is knowing that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. And my challenge to my Republican colleagues is, why aren't you having this same public and painful conversation about your nominee? Because on that debate stage, Donald Trump lied every 90 seconds. He yet again refused to say he would accept election results when the last time around police officers died in the line of duty because he tried to incite an insurrection. He's trying to politicize Social Security. He's trying to hand Ukraine back over to Russia. How much more do House Republicans need to hear before they're willing to do the right thing?
All right, well, the Biden.
You could hear John Roberts audibly sighing again. He's like, how dare you point out just objective issues with Donald Trump? Notice the framing of it. Roberts is like, the Biden campaign has wanted to make this all about Donald Trump, which makes sense. It also makes sense that the Trump campaign is trying to make it a referendum on President Biden, even though President Biden's record is objectively good. The political perception of it is bad. It makes sense that these two campaigns are trying to make it a referendum on the other. But Roberts is like, why won't you also, as a Democrat, make this all about Joe Biden? Auchincloss is doing the right thing. The questions have been asked. It's good that they've been asked. The debate has been had. There's been scrutiny. This is proof that the Democratic Party is simply not a cult the way that the Republican Party is. We are willing to publicly, painfully criticize and ask painful questions about our own candidate with an objectively superior record. The Republicans won't do that because they are an authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle. And I love the fact that Auchincloss threw that back in Roberts' face. This is the energy, folks. No matter who the candidate is, this is the sort of energy that we need to bring. I love that. Let me know what you think in the comments.